Why saving too much for retirement may be just as risky as saving too little. Interesting, huh? I never thought about that with the retirement crisis. My man Roth from PEI sent this to me, so let's read this. It's from the Financial Post of Canada, and it's still applicable down here as well. Dateline, actually, we got a date on this, May 22nd, all right, so just last week. Financial Post, and is written by Jason Heath. Only 20% of 65-year-old Canadians will live for 30 years, and that means their money will far outlive them. Could not agree with that more. So, professional financial planners spend most of their time, can't get rid of this lady here, I'm not sure how to get rid of her. Anyway, all right. Professional financial planners spend most of their time helping people prepare so they don't run out of money in retirement. Longevity risk, inflation, sequence of returns, long-term care costs are among the risks we try to navigate and neutralize. But in the process of being overly risk-averse, it is possible retirees can encounter that another risk, which is oversaving. And this man, right, he's going to say right now, is critical. I've had the same instance myself. I may be jaded, having had a couple of clients and family members die much too soon in recent years. But those experiences have led me to really question the cost of encouraging savers to be too prepared for a long retirement that may never come. The risk of saving too little is obvious and overdone. I completely agree with that. But what are the potential risks of saving too much, and how can they be avoided? It is not uncommon for retirees to engage in relatively simple retirement calculations. Some aspire to live off investment income, so if a $500,000 portfolio generates 2.5% a year, they plan to spend $12,500. Or if they need $25,000 in addition to their government or workplace pensions, they want to have a large savings of about $1 million to generate the same 2.5% expected income. Others use simple division to determine the withdrawals. We talked all about these, but that's fine. But here we go. An excellent 2017 Morningstar article by David Blanchett, titled "Safe Withdrawal Rates for Retirees in Canada Today," sought to Canadianize William Bengen's sustainable withdrawal rate, the 4% rule, essentially. All right, Blanchett looked at the historic returns for a Canadian investor and even added a reasonable 1% assumption for investment fees, which Bengen did not have. They found that the safe withdrawal rate for Canadians, with 50% in Canadian stocks and 50% in Canadian bonds, was closer to 3.5%. Even more interesting, the authors ran forecasts with a forward-looking perspective of the way the markets are overvalued today relative to historical norms, that's bonds and stocks. And they had a 3% with only a 50-50 stock and bond portfolio. While, this is going back to Jason, while I appreciate much of the importance of the research gives retirees peace of mind that your investments will last for over 30 years, 90% of the time, I think it's also important to note that only 20% of 60-year-olds will live through 30 years. That means the majority of Canadian retirees, actually the vast majority, planning to live off investment income or using a 3 to 4% initial withdrawal rate will far outlive, their money will far outlive them. For the Canadians whose money may outlive them, I think it's also important to consider factors ever closer to home. Homeowners, and particularly those in expensive cities like Vancouver and Toronto, may be sitting on savings that far outweigh the value of their investment or pensions. And while a brick cannot be used to buy bread, you will always need somewhere to live. A retiree in their 80s or 90s, if they make it that far, may not live in the family home forever. Even if a 65-year-old does not end up that unlucky, 10% of those 3 to 4% initial withdrawal from their investments may not be sustainable. How much of an emergency fund might their home provide? And if an eventual downsize or outright sale means to move to a retirement home is not considered, how much too much do they save that they could have spent? How much too long did they work? Another practical risk for Canadian retirees, and same thing here in the States, is that having too much money in a retirement account. The tax sheltering of a retirement savings plan is great, particularly for those high income earners who are working and have high incomes. But for those who die young, particularly if they do not have a spouse to whom they can leave their accounts on a tax deferred basis, dying with too much savings can be an awfully expensive proposition. In fact, a $500,000 retirement plan left to a non-spouse beneficiary, such as one's children, could be subject to almost 50% tax depending on the province or here in the States. It's 100% correct. Long-term care costs are an unpleasant risk for retirees that need to be considered as well. The Canadian Institute for Health reports that the average long-term care facility stay is about 18 months. It's very similar to what we have here in the States. But no doubt there are many people who receive private or family cares at home. My mother passed away in March, a few days after turning 66. She suffered from 2 terminal illnesses, had in-home care, and we're contemplating the best way to arrange and pay for her long-term care needs. Her care costs were minimal in the end, and her retirement savings meant to fund her retirement for the next 30 years turned out to be more than she ever needed. I'm acutely aware of the risk of running out of money, but by no means wish to suggest that savers and retirees live for today. But I can't help but wonder if being overly conservative is doing them a disservice. After celebrating Mother's Day without my mom, I appreciate the risk of oversaving more than ever. And I think it's important to maintain balance in life. If we only knew how long we were going to live, it'd all make this retirement planning thing much easier. So let's see if we can see the comments down here. Let's see. I'm sorry to hear about your mom. My mom is 78 years old and chooses to live comfort. I don't know these terminologies there, but the author, here we go. The author completely overlooks the opportunity for a retiree to recognize while they're still alive that they may have even more assets than they ever need and therefore can afford to donate the excess to the Liberal Party of Canada or the Trudeau Foundation. Oh, man. Middle-aged. All right. Well, anyway, I love it. This goes kind of back to Larry Kolikoff's stuff about, look, man, you're saving too much. Your expenditures when it comes to retirement consumption smoothing relative to a historical, we need 4 to 5% a year. And it goes back to the research even Kitces talks about. I mean, that is the safe withdrawal rate. I mean, again, if you look at fees, it's 3 to 3.5%. But that's just assuming what you never ran out of money for. You never ran out of money. Well, okay, but that's, again, it assumes no due diligence on your part as a retiree. So I like it. Good article. I'm glad my man Roth sent this to me. If you find a good article like that you want me to read about, let me know. I do believe the biggest risk, frankly, is that you're going to die too young before you had a chance to enjoy your retirement. Don't fall for that risk. All right, we'll see you next time.